Chuck. Morning, Robert. Easton. Robert, this is last week's. Robert, you need one. Ready? Well, good morning. Am I on? William and I, am I on? Okay, thank you. Good morning. Welcome to Powerful Moments this morning. Uh, one, I'm not on. They're saying I'm not loud enough. William, is that better? Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Oh, no. A little bit of technical challenge. Now? No. A little louder, William. A little bit. Still not loud enough. How about now? Nope. Is it? Mine is on. The little green light's on. Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know. Yeah. Oh, okay. Is that any better? No. Yes. Getting higher. Getting better. There we go. There we go. Now we're cooking. Now we're cooking. So as they used to say, now we're cooking with gas. Have y'all ever heard that? Is that okay? So some of my sayings, you're too young to know what they are, but yeah. All right. So anyway, October the 9th. What's that? 2 weeks, I guess, from tonight, 6 o'clock. We'll be having our Noah videos. So all we're asking, it's at 6 o'clock. It'll be here. Bring some pickup foods, finger foods, and we'll have a one Noah video for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have our little intermission and have some snacks and fellowship, and then we'll have the second Noah video, and it's about a little over 20 minutes. So won't be a late night, so we'll all, mostly me, get home in time almost for my bedtime, so that's good. All right, so I think Ken learned a valuable lesson today. He obviously has never been at an auction, so Martha's out with an eye infection today. She's doing fine, but didn't want to take the chance of touching something and it be contagious. She doesn't think it is, but anyway. So Ken was waving at somebody. I was asking this group, I need a reader, and Ken was waving at somebody over there, so he volunteered. Ooh, he volunteered right there. So at an auction, if you don't want to bid, you better be sitting on your hands. Cindy was sitting on her hands. She's been to an auction, so so that's good. All right. I think Betty Allison went to rehab this week, so great progress for her. So that's an answered prayer there. Then I've not heard from Debbie since early in the week. Debbie Woodard, she was still kind of struggling with some issues earlier in the week, some from her surgery, some from a fall she had. So anybody got a latter part of the week update from Debbie? Anything other than that? Okay, so continue to keep her in your prayers. And one other request, probably some of you realize this, it's public information, so I'm sure some of you do, that our governor's wife, Maria Lee, has Hodgkin's and is seriously ill. So spent quite a few days in Vanderbilt. I'm not sure if she's still there or not right now, but keep her in your prayers. You may and may not know his story, but his first wife, our governor's first wife, died from a horsing. Still not loud enough. They're telling me, William. So.
And Tom, it may help if you move the mic to your shirt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So anyway, I was just going to say our governor lost his first wife in a horsing accident. She got bucked off a horse and ultimately killed her. So, tragic situation now. His second wife has Hodgkin's disease, so very serious for them. So keep them in your prayers if you would, please. All right, what else? Anything else, Stan?
So they had to take Janet Bain's mom to the hospital this morning
Okay.
with breathing issues.
Okay, Janet Bain's mother, Helen Jenkins, was taken to the hospital this morning with a breathing issue, Stan says. So she's 90-something, yeah, 90-something, so. Okay, anything else? So Nona says her, I'm going to shorten it a little bit. Nona's, Mrs. Brown? Mrs. Brown, not this Mrs. Brown, but your neighbor, Mrs. Brown, went to the hospital, was taken to the hospital, was 95 years old, went to rehab, went back in the hospital with the issues, so keep her in your prayers too. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah, COVID's still rampant. She has COVID, so again, hopefully COVID is, well, we're not going to get off on COVID. Okay, anyway, so keep her in your prayers as well. All right. Okay. Well, the Cumberland, was he a current player or former player? Current player. Cumberland, current football player, is in the hospital. They had a car wreck. One was killed, 3 were injured, and 1 is still in the hospital, is critical. Yeah. The others who were not killed are out of the hospital, but this one young man is still there in ICU, so continue to keep him in your prayers. Okay. Thank you for sharing this morning. Okay. Anything else? Jill? You're here. Thank you. You hadn't prayed in a long time, so pray for us this morning. Thank you, Jill. All right, Wes, would you hit that first video for us, please, sir? Again, this is a repeat from last week, just a little refresher, so. We're not, there.
He said, son, a machine is only as good as you build it. But if you really love what you're doing, then you can make something spectacular. Well, isn't that something?
This is my father, Henry Ford. To Pierre Dupont.
It is amazing to be on top.
Boeing is the future of aviation. Mr. Morgan, what's happening?
We're in the age of the machine.
When people leave my bank after I give them a loan, they feel like they've got free money. But in reality, they're going to pay every month for the rest of their life with interest.
Our floor will be 800 feet up, St. Andy's Chrysler's.
Make it taller than that, man.
Can you account for the fact that House of Morgan has paid no taxes for years?
The rules got bent until there were no rules.
You are nothing short of a war profiteer, a merchant of death.
If there was a war, no country in Europe would stand a chance against Germany. What's going on? There's been an attack in Hawaii.
All right, thank you. So If you remember, this was a preview of a series that was going to be on the History Channel, The Giants of Industry. So with that, if you would, Ken, read Genesis chapter 6, the first 4 verses for us, please, because we're going to be talking about giants today.
Okay. When mankind began to multiply on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were beautiful, and they took any they chose as wives for themselves. And the Lord said, My spirit will not remain with mankind forever, because they are corrupt. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth both in those days and afterwards, when the sons of God came to the daughters of man, who bore children to them. They were powerful men of old, the famous men.
All right, thank you, Ken. So, first question, and last week the pastor talked about this, so we should all have the answer right. Who were the Nephilim? Who was listening last week to the sermon? Now this, a lot of heads down. So it's a napping going on last week, huh? All right. So, good, Jill. Good note taking there. So, we couldn't be dogmatic, I would say, or definitive in the answer of who the Nephilim are. There's several different opinions. Jill gave you some of those opinions. Christianity.com says scholars and commentators translate the word Nephilim as giants or fallen ones. Even among the most brilliant, there is debate on translating this term. Nephilim is often translated as fallen ones because of the relationship to the Hebrew word Nephal, to fall. Nephal is N-A-P-H-A-L. One school of thought associates these beings with fallen angels or their offspring. So the concept of the Nephilim, and I think the pastor mentioned this last week, could be where the thought came of the mythical Greek gods, other gods of the time. The Greeks were after this, obviously, but other gods that were half men and half gods. So it could have come from the Nephilim, could be the basis for that mythology as such. They could be, as Jill said, the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of man that's mentioned in Genesis 6:2, which Ken just read. And but the Nephilim are the representation of the extent of evil, wickedness, and sin in the world at the time of Noah. So the Nephilim were said to be, in the verses that Ken read, mighty men who were of old and men of renown. They were worldly as such. Okay? So in Genesis 6:4, it says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. What's it mean, afterward? What's it referring to here? Mary says maybe it's referring to after the flood. Mary said she thought she read that somewhere this week, but she didn't pay that much attention to it. So it is after the flood. Now, I don't think these Nephilim lived through the flood, I don't think, if you believe, and we'll get into this in more detail later, that it was a worldwide flood. So these Nephilim would have been killed at that time. But there is another occasion where this term is used. Do you recall when that is? Yeah. 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 So Nancy says it was when the 12 12 spies. I'll walk over near this and I get feedback, sorry. Then the 12 spies went in to scout out the promised land. That they came back with the story that there were giants there, Nephilim as such were in there, and then Jamie refers to a scripture which is Numbers 13:33, and it says, "We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." So these were the people that God had commanded when the Israelites were to go into the promised land, that they were to totally destroy all of the people who lived in the promised land. And the thought may be, I really hadn't thought about this before, but if they were Nephilim, and if you believe the Nephilim were demonic in nature, maybe the reason behind God's command to destroy all the people is that of this demonic presence in the promised land. And so in order to rid this demonic presence in people in that land, in those lands, he commanded them to kill them all. All right, so with that, Ken, if you would read Genesis 6, verses 5 through 9, please.
When the Lord saw that man's wickedness was widespread on the earth, and that every scheme his mind thought of was nothing but evil all the time, the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. Then the Lord said, I will wipe off the face of the earth man whom I created, together with the animals, creatures that crawl, and birds of the sky, for I regret now that I made them. Noah, however, found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Now these are the family records of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among his contemporaries. Noah walked with God.
All right, thank you, Ken. So how do you think the people of Noah's day perceived the Nephilim? What do you think they thought about them? Mary, you going to say something? Oh. What do you think? They might be afraid of them. Yeah, I think so. Probably maybe afraid they were giants, so could be afraid of them. What else? What term was used to describe them? What's that? Famous. They were famous. They were men of renown. So what do you think? How do you think the people, could have been afraid of them, but they also could be what? What's that? They could be respected. And so in the eyes of the world, I think they very well could have been respected. They could have been obviously feared because of their power, their fame, but they could be respected. Genesis 6:5 again, Ken just read it. It says, Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of mankind was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. So if you notice in the words that this verse uses to describe wickedness on the earth, it uses every, only, continually. So I don't think there could be a more dramatic emphasis on the wickedness on the earth than in that verse when it uses those three words, every, only, continually. So it was pervasive, you might say. So are there Nephilim today? First, yes. How do you think what's that, Jill? Washington, D.C., yeah. How do you think they're perceived? Evil. Think they're perceived evil by the common person? Evil, yeah. Sure people do. Anybody else? We just saw the video, that History Channel video, and it mentions some, you might call them Nephilim, men of renown, famous men in that video. J.P. Morgan, DuPont, Boeing, who else was there in there? Henry Ford, Chrysler, all these are mentioned. They were the giants of industry. How do you think the common people, how do you think the average, I should say common, the average person perceived those folks? Think, yeah. Karen says she thinks they were respected and that people wanted to be like them. They're famous people, right? They're men of renown. And even though there are evil folks in Washington, still a lot of people respect them. They want to be like them, don't they? Unfortunately, if you saw some of the words in that video that they used, it popped up a big word successful, popped up a big word greedy as well, didn't it? So our human nature probably drives us to be like these mighty men of renown. So, however, even though the average person may consider them men of renown, famous men, somebody we might want to be like, how does God perceive them? Oh, yeah, no question about that. Doesn't mean you're evil. Doesn't mean you're necessarily greedy.
A lot of those men that we're talking about in that video went on to change the world in great ways.
Yeah.
And a lot of people went on to line their pockets after they got to a certain point.
Yeah.
And it was all about them and more and more and more. So there's a point where Satan takes over the successfulness in mankind and turns it into me.
Yeah. Mark says there's a point that Satan takes over successful men and comes to be about me. Certainly. So, when we look at these men, what are we looking at? Are we looking at their success, their fame, their renown? But what does God look at? He looks at their hearts. He's looking at their hearts. So some of these guys, I'm sure, as Mark says, could have been good guys. The success doesn't necessarily mean you're evil, but God's not looking at our worldly success. He's evaluating our hearts, isn't he? So, all right, so what was the origin of this wicked, sinful, spiritual status that prevailed on the earth during this time in Genesis? The Garden of Eden. And what happened with the Garden of Eden? Yeah, Adam and Eve ate of the tree they were not supposed to eat of. And why did they do that? Satan. Yeah, Satan entered the body of a snake as such. We think a snake. And he enticed Eve and Adam to eat the fruit of the tree that they were forbidden to eat of. So, but Revelation 12:12 tells us how, or appears to tell us how this came about when that verse says that, let me read that, when the angels were thrown down to the earth. I thought I had that printed here, but I don't. So, as a result of these, the result of angels being thrown down to the earth, that Adam and Eve, Satan being a fallen angel, entered this body of a serpent to entice them to eat the fruit of the tree that they were not supposed to eat. So sin enters the world. Now we see this slide of humanity from the Garden of Eden to this time of Noah, when again it says, wickedness of every man was great on the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Genesis 4:7 says, and if you do well, sin is lurking at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it. So since the fall of Adam and Eve, sin has been lurking at the door, ready to take advantage whenever possible of us. So the sin problem, even though these giant people, these Nephilim, were viewed as being men of renown and famous and opposing figures as such, even though they were giant people, they could not conquer the problem of sin. So the sin problem was not a problem of the Nephilim, but a problem for all the people on earth. So true or false, the people of Noah's day recognized their wickedness as wickedness. False. Yeah, the pastor hit on that last week. And Ken, if you would read Matthew 24, verses 38 and 39, please.
For in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah boarded the ark. They didn't know until the flood came and swept them away. So this is the way the coming of the Son of Man will be.
Thank you. So everything was going on as normal up until the time of flood. People were getting married and having children, and just everything seemed to be typical, and then the flood came. So what was the problem? What were the people lacking in their lives that were destroyed by the flood? Mark's about to say it, weren't you, Mark? What were they lacking? What did they not have in their lives? Or who did they not have in their lives? A better way to phrase that. They did not have God in their lives. So they had removed God from their daily lives. They were going along as normal, as typical, but no longer was God a part of their lives. So is activity in the world today anyway like the world of Noah in that day? Yes. How? People don't recognize their wickedness as wickedness, Jill says. Yeah. I saw some statistics recently. It says Gallup found 81% of Americans expressing belief when asked a simple question, do you believe in God? This was down from 87% in 2017 and a record low for this question first asked in 1944 when 96% believed. So it reached a high of 98% in the 1950s and 60s. 1950s and 60s, 98% of the people, and this is talking about in the U.S., believed in God. So recently I saw, I can't remember who did the survey, but it indicated that the everyday people who believe they are Christians are down in the 60s now, compared to probably 80s, 90s, not that many years ago. So, so this percentage we're seeing that believe in God, believe they are Christian, whatever, is dropping dramatically over the last several years. So why is this? Why is the belief in God dropping? Why is the belief that of people that they're Christian, why is it dropping? Ken, hand Nancy the microphone, let her read that. She didn't raise her hand, but we're going to let her read anyway.
And because they did not think it worthwhile to have God in their knowledge, God delivered them over to a worthless mind to do what is morally wrong. That's Romans 1:28.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. So, at some point, God says, yeah, you can do your own thing. I'm not intervening in terms of correction, in terms of changing what you want to do. So you can do your own thing. And we'll see that's what really the Israelites later on, what was their demise. So in light, yeah, Jill. Jill said, I think she's asked, she put in form a question, but she's making a statement, I think, too. Is it the issue that older Christians are passing away and the next generations have not been taught, have not been brought up in the ways of the Lord. Did I get that what you said, kind of, Jill? So she asked that, do you believe? So I certainly believe that's part of the issue. And I think it's part of the issue, well, it's a big issue with parents and grandparents, but it's also a issue with the church. When I say the church, I'm talking about the big church, in that I don't know that compared to years ago when I was brought up, what was biblically taught in the church then, you get the same teaching today. A lot of it's become more about entertainment and so forth versus real spiritual growth. So we're losing a generation there, and I think you see this in a lot of areas in life today. In schools, you see it. In the sanctity for human life, as you can see, we've got a big abortion issue as a part of this election that's coming up. That's been it's going to be, will be, looks to be a big key to that. Taking God out of Christmas, out of the marketplace, out of everywhere that possibly we can take him out of as part of that. So I think it's just a general decline, as we saw in the statistics a minute ago, in the belief in God and Christian principles, even moral principles. So I think we see the church following secular society instead of trying to lead people back to God. We're following and moving towards secular society. We go to Hilton Head a couple of times a year, and the last time we went to Hilton Head, or the last few times we went to Hilton Head, we attended a church called North Island Baptist Church. And it's a small church, has 25, 30 folks attending, and mostly, really, I guess all of them are older. We felt kind of young there, so that was good. But the pastor there is a retired Navy chaplain, and I think we've been, like I said, several times, and every sermon we've heard has been excellent. And on the 4th of July, he kind of did a sermon about how Christianity evolved in our nation, starting back from the founding fathers. But he listed 3 things that was recent that I think really shows the slippery slope that we're on. In 2009, the Episcopal Church ordained homosexuals into the priesthood. In 2012, the Methodists sanctified homosexual marriage. In 2019, the Lutheran Church made abortion a right as part of its church covenant. So you can see other denominations gradually moving towards secular society, secular beliefs. And kind of as an aside, we were doing some updating on our estate planning, and part of it is that we'd make some gifts. And in the first draft of this, it said something like what the Southern Baptist Convention believes, because we wanted to specify it be spiritual, Christian oriented. And I got to thinking about that a little bit. Well, look at these other denominations. I'm kind of afraid in so many years, is that really no telling what Southern Baptists will do if we follow this trend of secular society. So we used the 2000 Baptist Faith and Message to try to set something there that we thought was a good peg as such to be based on, instead of what might be current thought. Yeah, Mary says Southern Baptist Convention has dropped 2 churches this year because of their secular position in homosexual marriage. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we should love homosexuals. We should witness to homosexuals, but we're not to condone homosexual behavior, continued homosexual behavior. So they're welcomed here. And hopefully through being here, the Holy Spirit convicts them and their life has changed. So that's our hope and goal, or my hope and goal anyway. So anyway, I got off on a tangent there. Sorry about that. So why did God not just destroy Noah with the rest of the earth and the people? God could have created men again. He created Adam, so he could certainly have done it again. All he needed was a little bit of dirt, right? So why did he not just... What? He wanted a remnant. God typically, if you look through Scripture, he allows a remnant to remain. But why? Why Noah? What's that, Janine? Oh, he found favor in God. Exactly. So thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Stan, for my hearing is not what it should be, maybe. It says the answer there is in Genesis 6:9. So Ken, read before I didn't put that on your list. Genesis 6:9 one more time for us. Talks about some characteristics of Noah.
These are the family records of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among his contemporaries. Noah walked with God.
Yeah. And we talked about last week before sometime, it says Noah walked with God. Who else walked with God? Enoch. Enoch was walking so close to God, as we talked about. As the little girl said, that Enoch walked so far that God said, "You're closer to my house now than yours, so just come on and be with me." So Enoch was translated evidently by this verse that also Noah had this close relationship with God that his ancestor had as well. 2 Chronicles 16 verse 9 says, "For the eyes of the Lord roam throughout the earth, so that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his." So Noah's heart, it appears, was completely God. So he, as Jill said, was the remnant that God allowed to remain. So Noah in that verse is described as a righteous man. How did Noah achieve righteousness? Yeah, by faith. What did you say, Jill? By walking with God. So, and that was kind of a trick question because he did not achieve it. We don't achieve righteousness. God imputes righteousness to us because of our belief, because of our faith. So righteousness is not a result of our working. Righteousness, just as Jill just said, comes from walking with God. It comes from faith, not works. So does this incident of Noah and his family being spared as a remnant remind you of another incident when God saved a family? Saved Lot, exactly. Lot and his family were also spared. Lot and his daughters, they were saved from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And during that time, not 10 righteous people could be found. So those cities were destroyed. All right. Why did God choose Noah to build the ark? Because of his walk. Somebody quoted this verse a minute ago. Genesis 6:8 says, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And as Mark said, Genesis 6:9 says, Noah walked with God. So Noah followed. We just mentioned Enoch. So he followed in his great-great-grandfather's footsteps, Enoch's footsteps, and walked with God. So that's why he was chosen. So Ezekiel, it's Bible trivia time. Ezekiel points to the three most righteous men up to the writing of Ezekiel's prophecy. And Noah was one of these three most righteous men. Who are the other two? Not Enoch. But good guess. What? D is one and J is the other. Not David. Who's that? Easton got it? Job is one. There you go. Easton, the child will teach us, right? So there we go. Job is one. Who is the other? D, A, Daniel, thank you. Job and Daniel were the other two. Ezekiel 14:14 says, even though these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, are in its midst, by their own righteousness they could only save themselves, declares the Lord God. And Noah is also included in the Faith Hall of Fame, Hebrews chapter 11. So Noah's wife and his sons' wives were saved from the flood. So what does Ezekiel 14:14 mean when it says they, Noah, Daniel, and Job, could only save themselves? Nancy says you cannot have righteousness by association. What do you mean by that, Nancy? Yeah, if your mother was righteous, it doesn't mean you're righteous. So righteousness is imputed by God through faith. So Noah's sons and their wives, Noah's wife, all of them, Mrs. Noah, they all had to make their own decision to enter the ark. Noah could not make that decision for them. So they had to have their own faith, their own belief in God, and enter the door of the ark. This is also the same for us. We make our own individual decision of faith. Our parents or anyone else, for us, for our children, our grandchildren, we cannot make that decision for them. It's an individual decision. So Noah's wife, his sons, his daughter-in-laws all made that decision. The rest of the world, the door was open. They chose not to make that decision. Okay? So why walk with God? What's the results of walking with God? What are the benefits, maybe is a better word, of walking with God? What's that? Having joy in your life. Yeah. Salvation. Two good ones there. Having joy, having salvation. Being an example is a benefit or result of walking with God. Yes. So even though, that's good, very good novella, I like that. Even though Noah could not make the profession of faith, make that decision for his wife, his son, his children, he could, and he obviously was an example to them that they followed. Oh, good. What else? Anything else? I had a couple of three here. Walking with God eliminates loneliness. We always have a friend if we're walking with God. Jesus is our friend, so we're never alone. Jesus is always there. So that's a benefit. Walking with God is, Jill kind of said is joyful. It's also satisfying to believers, but it's also satisfying to God. If we're walking with God, it is satisfying with Him. He chose Noah to build the ark. Enoch was translated. They were walking with God, so it was satisfying to God as well. So walking with God insulates us against the world. Now, we are in the world, but we're not of the world. So we have some insulation. We have some bubble wrap around us. I guess that bubble wrap's kind of the Holy Spirit. It's probably not a very good analogy, but we're insulated to a degree from the world. So what did Noah's walk with God lead to? Not a trick question. What's that, Karen? He spared him. Certainly spared him. He was able to keep his earthly life. What did he have to do that? He had to be obedient. How was he obedient? He built an ark. So Noah's walk with God led to his work for God. So just as with us, our walk with God should naturally progress to our work for God. So the rhetorical question for us is, how has your walk with God led to your work for God? How has your walk with God led to your work for God? How are you serving? Maybe is another way to ask that. Again, it's rhetorical. So what was Noah's work? We just mentioned part of it. What was it? Obviously, it was building an ark. Obviously, it's building an ark. According to the instructions that God gave, he gave some plans relative to building the ark. But Noah had other job too. What was it? No. That's kind of a misnomer. We'll talk about that later, Karen. Kind of a misnomer there. So, what else though? He had one other job. Noah was a... Go ahead, Easton. He was a preacher. Here, Easton is leading us again. He was a preacher of righteousness. So Noah was a preacher. So 2 Peter 2:5 says, Noah, a herald of righteousness. Noah witnessed to a world of people who were around him, who were in total rebellion. But again, the wickedness on the earth was described as ever, only, continually. But even regardless of this extent of wickedness, Noah was faithful in his job, his work, to build an ark, but also to preach to that world. Okay? How old was Noah when he started building the ark? Anybody know? Bible trivia. All right. Jill says it was 600 when the flood started. He was 601 when it ended because he was in there a year. So how old was he when he started the process? 480. Why do you say that, Jamie? So in Genesis 6:3, Jamie's right. It says it's a warning of God gives a warning of the coming of the flood, the judgment on the world. And he says it's 120 years is this warning period, the 2-minute warning as such. In this case, the 120-year warning. So different people have different thoughts about that. Some people believe, that was going to be the age of man. But I believe that was the warning period, the time when Noah became aware he was anointed to build this ark. So 120 years later, at age 600, the flood began, and he had been in this process since he was 480 years old. So why is Noah's age important? Or is it? Yeah, shows you how long you can live if you're righteous, is what Karen says. Yeah, that's the truth to that. What else? Why is it? Very good, Jill. So Jill says, even though we're old, we're never too old to continue our work for God. So Noah was 480 years old, in my belief, when he began preparation to build the ark. So it's also, I think it's important that because we might not see the results of our work for a long time, and sometimes never, we're not to be discouraged. We're not to give up. We're to keep on working. Noah was in this process 120 years, but before he really saw what was to happen. So the whole world was in rebellion against God. Only, continually, just thoroughly, they were in rebellion. So Noah reminds us that one life can make a difference in a sinful world. So Noah's life made a difference in the life of his family. He made a difference, even though all these other people didn't come into the ark. They were asked. They didn't come in, but his wife, his sons, his daughter-in-laws, he made a difference in their lives. And they came in. They entered the ark. It reminds me of the story. You probably heard this story. The little boy's walking along the beach, and the surf is up, and the tide is going out, and he's walking along the beach, and he's throwing stuff into the ocean. And this man comes along. He says, "What are you throwing into the ocean?" And the little boy says, "I'm throwing starfish in the ocean because the tide's going out, surf's up. If they don't get back into the ocean, they will die." And there were hundreds of starfish on the beach. So the older man says, "You can't throw all these starfish into the ocean. There's too many. Don't you realize?" The older man said, "Don't you realize that there are miles of beach and hundreds of starfish on this beach? You can't make a difference." And after listening to this politely, the little boy responds by picking up another starfish and throwing it into the ocean, and then smiling at the man. The little boy said, "I made a difference for that one." So I think that's a great story in that we may not be able to make a difference for everybody. We can make a difference maybe for one. That one person may be in our family, like Noah did. Maybe Jill. Jill says that like the other day she stopped traffic to move a turtle out of the road. I don't know. You may have caused wrecks all behind you, Jill. Oh, wow. Jill was holding back a tractor trailer with her hands, so it's kind of like Superman. I envision you. All right, one other. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I don't know how old that song is, but Nona says the song that says, "Each one can reach one." So, yeah, a hymn that we sing. So application 1 is Noah reminds us that one life can make a difference in the entire world. Application 2 is Noah also gives us hope that it's possible for people to walk with God regardless of the evil, the wickedness that surrounds us. We can still walk with God even in this world where evil and wickedness is all around us. So on your paper there, on your handout, you got some questions for consideration. We're not answering these. These are for your own personal thought process or rhetorical. So the first one is, are you making a difference even with one life? Are you making a difference in your family as Noah did? Are you walking with God even though we are surrounded by evil and corruption? Do you think you're too old to work for God? You're not. Noah was 480 years old. Do you think you're too young to work for God? You're not. I suspect Noah's sons began helping their father at a young age in preparing and building the ark. And then finally, are you not seeing the results of your working for God? Don't be discouraged. Noah did not see results for 120 years. All right, so we're going to move in. We've got a few minutes left. We're going to move into the real kind of ark experience, you might call it. And with that, we're going to try to answer a number of questions in the next couple of weeks or so about this ark experience, you might say. And then some of those questions includes the following. Who was Noah and what kind of man was he? We've talked about that to a degree already. Is the account of Noah, the ark, and the flood important? If so, why? We have not talked about that yet. If God is a loving, merciful God, why would he send a flood to kill all those people? How could God kill the innocent children in the flood? They didn't do anything wrong. Why would God kill the animals because of man's actions? How could Noah and his family feel safe in a world that was filled with violence? Was there an ice age? How big was God's ark? Even as big as the ark was, how could it hold all the dinosaurs and all the other animals? How could Noah find all the animals to get them on the ark? Did the dinosaurs eat other animals on the ark? How could Noah and his family care for all the animals on the ark? We know that Noah, after leaving the ark, was a farmer. So how did Noah have the expertise to build the ark? So those are a few questions that we'll be trying to answer in these next chapters or so of Genesis. So before we do that, let's kind of begin with a dramatic account, you might say, of Noah, of what would have happened, what we believe might happen if Noah lived in the United States today, and he was called to build the ark today by God. So this is, Ken's going to read what may have happened if Noah was trying to build the ark today. So Ken?
The Lord speaks to Noah and says, "In 1 year I'm going to make it rain and cover the whole earth with water until all is destroyed. But I want you to save the righteous people and 2 of every kind of living thing on the earth. Therefore I am commanding you to build an ark." In a flash of lightning, God delivered the specifications for the ark. Fearful and trembling, Noah took the plans and agreed to build the ark. "Remember," said the Lord, "you must complete the ark and have everything aboard in 1 year." Exactly 1 year later, a fierce storm cloud covered the earth, and all the seas of the earth went into a tumult. The Lord saw Noah sitting in his front yard, weeping. "Noah," he shouted, "where is the ark?" "Lord, please forgive me," cried Noah. "I did my best, but there were big problems. First, I had to get a permit for construction, and your plans did not comply with code. I had to hire an engineering firm and redraw the plans. Then I got into a fight with OSHA over whether or not the ark needed a fire sprinkler system and flotation devices. Then my neighbor objected, claiming I was violating zoning ordinances by building the ark in my front yard. So I had to get a variance from the city planning commission. I had problems getting enough wood for the ark because there was a ban on cutting trees to protect the spotted owls. I finally convinced the U.S. Forest Service that I needed the wood to save the owls. However, the Fish and Wildlife Service wouldn't let me catch any owls, so no owls. The carpenters formed a union and went out on strike. I had to negotiate a settlement with the National Labor Union. Now I have 16 carpenters on the ark, but still no owls. When I started rounding up the other animals, I got sued by an animal rights group. They objected to me only taking 2 of each kind aboard. Then, when I got the suit dismissed, the EPA notified me that I could not complete the ark without filling an environmental impact statement on your proposed flood. They didn't take very kindly to the idea that they had no jurisdiction over the conduct of the creator of the universe. Then the Army Corps of Engineers demanded a map of the proposed new floodplain. I sent them a globe. Right now, I'm trying to resolve a complaint filed with the EEOC that I am practicing discrimination by not taking godless, unbelieving people aboard. The IRS has seized all my assets, claiming that I'm building the ark in preparation to flee the country to avoid taxes. I just got a notice from the state that I owe some kind of user tax that failed to register the ark as a recreational watercraft. Finally, ACLU got the courts to issue an injunction against further construction of the ark, saying that since God is flooding the earth, it is a religious event, therefore unconstitutional. I really don't think I can finish the ark for another 5 or 6 years, Noah wailed. The skies began to clear, the sun began to shine, and the seas began to calm. A rainbow arched across the sky. Noah looked up hopefully. "You mean you're not going to destroy the earth?" "No," the Lord said sadly, "the government already has."
So, unfortunately, it's satirical, obviously, but unfortunately, probably a lot of truth in that as well. So just kind of funny look at Noah trying to build the ark today. So we got 1 minute left, and I think that's too short to jump into where we go from here. But we'll pick up next week, Genesis 6, 9 through 10. I don't know if we'll get through all of this chapter, all this lesson that takes us to chapter 7, verse 5, but we'll start digging into the actual, again, experience of the ark.